week, and this week's artist is Valerie Case. Valerie is the owner of the hat making business, Rua Flores Inspired Hats. And thank you so much, Valerie, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I just a few years ago, several years ago, decided to do a switch up in careers and decided to start making hats. I had sewn everything known to man prior to that, ever since I was like 13, and got the idea because living in Mobile, ladies are always looking for hats to wear for Mardi Gras balls and special occasions. And having sewn everything, I decided this was something that I wanted to learn how to do. So that's what I did. I went out and lined up some classes in Austin with a milliner there. And she kind of introduced me to the process, and I've been working on it ever since.
Well, that's fascinating. So, whenever you spent time with the milliner, what was that like? How long were you there?
I was there basically for 2 full days with her, and it was fascinating. She had all kinds of tools and materials and things that I was just dying to get my hands on. And the first thing that I found realized that I needed, and I'm just showing you a small example of one, is something called a hat block.
Hmm.
And hat blocks are the traditional way of making them is out of a very hard wood, but also a wood that allows you to pin into it quite easily. And usually, hat block makers will make these out of some kind of local wood, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. This is a tiny one. This is a fascinator block, and it sits on the head kind of like that.
Mhm.
And so if you make a big hat, you need a big block. For little hats, little blocks. But that's just sort of the idea. And in fact, this is an example of a hat that I made using that block.
Oh, wow.
So, so you asked me about what kinds of experiences I had working with the milliner, and this would be basically where we started. We started with a small block and learning how to use the materials like this straw here. This is called cinnamon, and you can see it's quite sheer. You use 3, 4, 5 layers of cinnamon. I generally use 3 unless I want something to be really sturdy. You use several layers of that. You shape it over the block using steam and also some uh, stiffener. And after it dries, you peel it off of the block, you wire it, you put some kind of attachment, whether it's a headband or elastic, and then you do the decorations. So that's basically an introduction to how hats get made. And of course, 2-part hats with a crown and a brim. You do separate processes and then stitch them all together. I do make all of my hats by hand. Everything is stitched together. Nothing is glued, because that's the traditional way of doing it. It's also the prettiest way to do it, of course. So she had all kinds of different materials. There would be cinnamon. Then she would have, this is a different kind of straw here. This is called a capeline, and it is a different straw called parasisal. And you can use this, like cut it into pieces and use it, or you can use it as all one piece that you block over a big hat and make, a big hat block rather, and make a big hat.
Where do you purchase the hat blocks?
Okay, that's an interesting question because my understanding is there's nobody left in the United States who makes hat blocks. My hat blocks come from either Great Britain or from Australia. This one right here is from a fellow who's just outside London. And they are expensive, but you can make lots and lots of hats from one hat block. So a hat block like this little one probably ran around $150, $180.
Hmm.
But, I've probably made 30 hats from it so far.
Okay.
So, it's an investment.
Now, what started your interest in this topic?
So I was working in fashion retail for a while as just a fun thing to do when my daughter went off to college. And every year, women would come into the shop and say, "Do you have hats?" And we didn't have hats, not the kind they were looking for. We had like beach hats maybe, but we didn't have, dressy hats. So after a period of time, I thought, this is an unmet need. This is a niche in Mobile that someone could really do something with. And I decided, why not me? So several years ago, I was in Portugal traveling with some women friends, and I became inspired by the art and the creativity of that beautiful European city, this beautiful European city of Porto. And that just inspired me. I was ready for a change in my life. And I just said to myself, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go home. I'm going to find a teacher. I'm going to learn the process, and then I'm going to take it from there. And so that was 2018. And by 2019, I was making hats for Mardi Gras. So, and have been ever since. It's been really a lot of fun. And of course, you start out with a few blocks, and then it's just like every time I made a little money, I would buy some more blocks.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it is in art, that's what you do. So one thing I love about millinery is that it is endlessly creative. You can come up with so many combinations of materials and design ideas to make so many different looks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an inspiring, fun, creative thing to do.
So how long does it take you to make a hat?
A little hat like this one, the little black and white one, probably takes about 3 to 5 hours. And I'm talking about solid working time. But a big two-piece hat with the crown and the brim and then the decorations on that is probably a good 14 hours of solid, craftsmanship to make that hat. So, and that doesn't include the time that it takes to dry in between stages. You know what I'm talking about. When you stiffen it, it has to be left to dry, and then you wire it, and then you can do all the other things. So, like decorating it, the fun part. But it is a labor intensive thing, particularly the two-piece hats.
Where do you get your inspiration?
All over. I love to see what people like Kate Middleton wear. I love to see what other milliners are doing around the world. I'm a member of several organizations of milliners and keep up with, new techniques and new materials. And during COVID, it has offered an opportunity actually to take classes with milliners around the world. Milliners who would typically previously have offered only classes in their studios were learning how to use Zoom to reach out and conduct classes. So during this past year and a half, and in fact, I have another Zoom class that I'm getting ready to do in September. I've probably taken 10 Zoom classes. Some of them would be like 5-day intensive classes, and some would be 2-day, and some are just 1 day, but it's learning all kinds of different kinds of techniques and how to use different materials. So
what would you say would be the most interesting class you've taken so far from other milliners?
I have taken something called freeform cinema and freeform parasisal, and I don't have an example of that here, but it's where you actually use steam and manipulation to create the shape, and you don't really use blocks.
Okay.
So that's, and you can start off using maybe a block just to block the crown part, and then you can manipulate with your hands and with steam and wire to create something a little different. In fact, one of the hats that you have a picture of, the gold and white one, is a freeform cinema hat. So maybe you can, I don't know if you can pop that one up there.
Yes, give me just a second.
that picture.
Okay.
And that's a different one. The gold and white one. Gold and white. That's it. Maybe it doesn't look so gold in the picture. But you see how, so that's two pieces. And you have the little crown part, which is the part that sits on the head. And it has a headband to attach. And then you would actually use your iron and steam and cut a piece of cinnamon to make the gold, the sort of gold loop. And then there's wire in there to keep the shape of it, but that would be a free form. There was no block to do that. You just kind of use your hands and the steam wire to make that kind of a loop effect.
Okay. So this is something you'd use for more abstract, experimental designs.
Exactly. It's something that, and this particular example has two pieces. On the manipulated part, there's the gold cinnamon, and it's gold in that it has lurex threads running through it. So it actually has kind of a glittery effect to it, which is fun, very festive for Mardi Gras. And then there's also a trim on it that is made with something called lattice. And that is a cinnamon that actually has squares on it. So you can see through it. And then you can see there's a thin spring wire that's run around that edge. So the wire doesn't really attract attention to itself, but it's there to help it hold the shape. So that's called freeform cinnamon.
Okay, I can see where this would be more fun than doing the traditional hat work.
It is. It's a lot
more
of fun.
freedom.
And one thing about doing this style of hat making is you never exactly know where it's going to go, because you can start out with an idea, but the materials, as everyone who's manipulated materials in art knows, materials have their own way of behaving. So when you start on that, it can kind of direct you where it needs to go. So you might start out with one idea and it takes you in a different direction. But it's a lot of fun. And see, this hat could be done completely differently, where all the materials are all one, maybe two shades of one color. You could have a pale pink and a dark pink, or you could have a hot pink and an orange. So there are just lots of ways to do it. You could put some feathers or flowers on it too. So it's just really, like I said, endlessly creative. The milliner who taught me how to do that on Zoom is Tracy Chaplin, and she's British, but she is located near Marseille, France. And I actually was interested in traveling to her studio to take classes from her. And then COVID happened and she offered them online, which was actually a lot easier and cheaper than traveling to her studio. Maybe not as much fun, but it was available. So I've taken about 5 classes with Tracy.
Okay. Excuse me.
Bless you.
I'm going to change to the different hats. Let's start from the beginning. So what can you tell us about this hat?
Okay, this one is interesting too. This is another one I learned how to make with an online Zoom class. This is a different kind of a fiber. It's called ginseng, Jinsin. It actually has natural straw and polyester in it, and it fans in that really wonderful way. So you can make it, literally fan the way that it's shown here. And it comes in different colors, but I was really loving the white with the black sort of graphic on it. So I wanted to try making it as a complete circle. And I really loved the way it looked when it came out. And I decided to give it a very, I decided to give it a very Asian kind of a twist by adding the floral pattern on it that looks like a Japanese cherry tree. And then I don't know if you can see it in the picture, the little Baroque pearl and some loops of black to give it a sort of a more of a 3D dimensionality.
Yes.
But I just, like I said, I started out, I never intended to put the red flowers on there. I started out with the black and the white.
Oh, wow.
And then I thought, well, I really love the idea of putting this color on there, and it gave it that Asian look. So that's probably why I decided to put the pearl on there, because that looks so Asian as well, of course.
Oh, definitely.
So anyway, I just thought, like I said, when I'm doing something strictly because I want to do it, not as a custom hat, I can do things like this. I can just kind of follow wherever I want to go.
And this is on one of the blocks. So this was built on that.
No, this was not built on a block. This is another one that's hand manipulated. Yeah, you take the ginseng. I don't have any with me, I'm sorry. But you take this, and it actually is really easy to accordion it. And then you can stitch it in the center and then fan it out like that and stitch it on each end so it stays in one big circle. And I don't think I sent you the underside of it, but it's the same on the underside. It's the black and white on the underside too,
wow.
which is really fun. It's really fun to look at it like that. And that's one of the reasons I liked doing this one.
Yes. And so what are the flowers are made out of silk?
No, the flowers are cotton, I'm pretty sure, but they came as an applique. You see, that's an applique. And I think I took 3 different appliques and linked them together, and then I hand stitched them onto the hat. And then I'm pretty sure I used white thread to do that because I didn't want the stitches to show on the underside. And then and all milliners do this, some paint pens to color the thread so you can't see it.
Oh.
So there are all kinds of ways to just hide your work,
Oh, yeah. So the applique, where did you get where do you purchase
I buy a lot of wonderful materials on Etsy. There are so many small businesses out there that have, antique laces and appliques and beautiful vintage ribbon. And you can get so many things. So I have about 5 or 10 different vendors that I buy from a lot to get vintage ribbon, vintage flowers. I try to use vintage whenever I can because, of course, the quality of the materials and the craftsmanship are so beautiful. Now, this is not vintage at all. This is just a new applique that one of my vendors on Etsy sells.
Oh, okay.
But I had it in my bag of tricks just to pull out when I wanted it, as one does.
Okay, and here's the next hat we were looking at this week.
This was a custom hat that I made for a young lady who was a debutante in 2019, and she really liked the boater style of hat, and it really suited her. She looked gorgeous in it. So she had a cream-colored suit and big yellow buttons on the suit, and she wanted something to go with that. So this is the design we came up with, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the colors of the yellow and the cream, and I loved the way they went with the boater. So what makes the hat a boater is it has more or less a rather flat brim, not a lot of curve to it. And then the crown is also very straight-sided and flat. So it's not domed. It's not, it's just straight sides and straight on the top. And that makes it a boater. And this one has a higher than normal crown, which is what she wanted. But I love the materials. And so the feathers, see, this flower actually came from England. If I'm buying new flowers, I typically buy them from Petersham's in London because they have these gorgeous silk flowers. And then the feathers, I get these beautiful, they call them feather trees, which means a lot of feathers designed and attached to each other. I get these from a lot of different millinery places, including Petersham's in England. And then the band is another kind of straw too. It is a different kind of a straw that has silk in it. It's silk and straw. And by the way, straw refers to different plants. Different plants are what they use to create the different straws.
Okay.
I think cinnamon comes basically from what is a banana plant.
Hmm.
And it is basically handmade in the Philippines.
Mhm.
So they beat it and beat it and beat it and beat it until it comes out with this beautiful,
Wow.
texture. So there's a lot of handwork that goes into the materials before you even start manipulating a hat.
Wow. Okay, and we'll go to the next one.
So this one, you see the difference in the crown. This is a dome crown.
Mhm.
You can see the difference there. And then this is also some of that beautiful ribbon on here. I just love that stuff. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's cinnamon and silk combined. And you can dye it all sorts of colors. This is the color that I bought it in, this beautiful ivory. But you can dye it beautifully. And then again, another beautiful extra large silk flower. And then this has a deep brim that has a bit of a curvature to it. So
Okay.
this would be a nice big, Mardi Gras type hat. And I think this one, the binding, I always go in and hand do the binding on the edges.
Mhm.
And this one is a straw that matches the dome crown.
And you use the block for this one.
Yes, this one, both of these pieces. So this is a two-piece hat with a separate crown and a separate brim, and both of those are used on the block, done on the block.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, they are cool. And see, that block is huge. It's a big block
Hmm.
to make that. So those blocks probably run around $300-ish.
Yeah. So you have a room of just blocks at your house?
I do. I have a like a small bedroom that I have all of my blocks and my straws and my flowers and feathers and all of that. And then an adjacent room where I do the construction.
Mhm. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then we just looked at this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the blue one.
Oh, now this is another one. This is another freeform parasisal. So the gold and white one was freeform cinnamon, and just to refresh, the cinnamon is this fabric here, and the parasisal comes like this.
Ah.
So in the case of this one, I would have had a parasisal capeline, is what it's called, and it would have been all one piece like this one, and I would have cut it. I would have cut the hood off of the brim and manipulated each of those separately.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the crown part, which sits in the center, and you can see I kind of manipulated it so it has a ridge that sits up.
Mm-hmm.
And you completely finish that, and then you add the parasisal freeform kind of shape that goes around that. And I also added what is that called? Used to be crinoline. That's an edge of crinoline. So when you have it on, you can see through it. It's really quite fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I added the feather, and you can't see it in this picture, but on the other side, there's also like a little black, shiny patent leather brooch on the other side.
Wow.
To give it another little extra interest on the other side.
And you handed the swirl.
The swirl, everything. So the only thing that you use a quote unquote block for is you use like the head block just to do the crown part. You set it on there and then you manipulate it and let it dry and you stiffen it. But the swirl part is done completely by hand and then just hand stitched to attach.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing.
So that was another one of my my classes that I did.
Okay.
Classes.
That's cool. Well,
yeah.
That's all of the hats. Thank you so much for showing them to us today.
Sure.
Amazing work. Absolutely amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you coming here and sharing with us about your hat making. Is there anything else you'd like to share? A little bit about your business? Get in touch with you, that sort of stuff?
Sure. Well, I always have to tell people the reason for the name of my business because it's a little bit different. But when I was getting started and I had just had that inspirational trip to Porto, Portugal, One of the most beautiful, interesting, intriguing locations in the old city of Porto is a street called Rua das Flores, which means Street of Flowers. And it was a street that dates back to the Middle Ages. And it had that name because people would grow their fruits and their vegetables and their flowers. It was sort of like a city vegetable garden, and it has evolved to the point now where it is obviously in this downtown area of this beautiful old city, has lots of beautiful shops where people sell all kinds of handmade jewelry and handcrafted perfumes and hand painted scarves and things like that. And so I just was fascinated by that street just because of how old it is and how many creative things were going on there. So when I was trying to pay tribute to my trip to Portugal, I decided to name my business Rua Flores Inspired Hats because that's where my inspiration came from to start my business.
Very cool. So how can they reach you?
Okay, so I think you have it on your information, the name of the business, and they can reach me at my email account, which is ruafloresinspiredhats@gmail.com. And people can also text me on my phone number. That's fine. The reason I say text is because a lot of times, as you know, we don't answer our phone if it's an unknown number. But if someone wants to text me and say, I'd love to get in touch with you about having a hat made, or I'd like to see what you have, they can text me and then I'll know to answer it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can also keep an eye out. I've had hat shows at Balance in Mobile. I've had hat shows at the Holiday, at Sophiella Gallery downtown. And so any of those locations would know how to reach me too.
Okay, fabulous. Well, thank you so much. I do have one question I always ask people toward the end of an interview. What bit of advice would you give to a University of South Alabama student?
Believe in yourself. Just, you can do it. If you get a bee in your bonnet, it just is, especially now when there's so many contacts available on the internet, you can find a mentor, a teacher, or someone who will share with you how to do things, and you can do it.
Okay, very cool.
If I can become a milliner at my ripe old age, you can do. A South Alabama student can do anything. That's
definitely. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us and sharing us about your passion. And,
okay, thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.